How's it going, everyone? My name is Rinzler here, back again for another video, and welcome to my next Yay, Nay, or Okay review. For newcomers of the channel, this is a movie review, and I grade on a different kind of system to keep things more general and not so nitpicky. I assign a movie a grade of Yay, Nay, or Okay, which are fairly self-explanatory. Yay means I thought it was good, Nay means I thought it was terrible, and Okay means I thought it was fine, okay, middle of the road. So with that being said, let's get into the review. So this is coming off of my reviews of Spider-Man's 1 and 2. So now we're on to Spider-Man 3, which is definitely the film in the franchise I have the most mixed feelings about. Because I gave both the first movies a yay, and I don't think anyone was expecting anything different from me. But Spider-Man 3, I'm much more mixed on. And I think most people feel the same way. So this was the first Spider-Man movie I had a real experience with. Because I was too young to see the first two in the theater. I was born in 2001, so I was only one when the first one came out, and I was only three when the second one came out. So the third one was the first one I actually remember seeing in the theater. It was the first one I actually saw, period. I hadn't even seen the first two yet when I saw the third one. Um, it's the first movie in the series I had a real experience with. But in spite of that, I never really had a nostalgia for this movie. Even when I hadn't seen the first two, this movie just didn't hit. Like it didn't really hit with me. I ended up coming away from this movie with just this empty, hollow feeling. Like I didn't feel any real emotional satisfaction watching it. And when I saw the one and two for the first time and rewatched three, I thought maybe my opinion would change, but it didn't. I still kind of felt this emotional hollowness with Spider-Man 3. But then I got older and I gave Spider-Man 3 another chance, and this movie has grown on me somewhat as I've gotten older. And I've made a ton of videos where I had to talk about Spider-Man 3 because, in my what if scenarios, I can't, if I talk about Spider-Man 1 or 2, I have to talk about 3. I can't not talk about it. So I have had reason to keep going back to Spider-Man 3. And, in all honesty, the more I see it, the more good things I find in it. First of all, right off the bat, I will say I think the score in Spider-Man 3 is insanely good. They couldn't get Danny Elfman to return for Spider-Man 3 because he had a brief falling out with Sam Raimi during the second movie. So he didn't come back for three. And so they brought in Christopher Young, who also did the score for Ghost Rider, the first Ghost Rider, with Nicolas Cage, which came out the same year. And I really like the score for Ghost Rider. So as you can imagine, I also really like the score for Spider-Man 3, which does a masterful job of mixing Christopher Young's horror movie style scores with Danny Elfman's Burton-y but still, spiritual themes. I just think it's a really good combination. And as a kid, I couldn't even tell that Danny Elfman didn't do this score. I actually think that it's blended quite seamlessly. Unlike say like Goblet of Fire, where you can tell John Williams didn't do the score for that immediately. With Spider-Man 3, it's less obvious to me that Danny Elfman didn't do the score because they do such a masterful job of mixing what he had done with the new stuff that Christopher Young brought in. I think that's great. And I think the decision to bring in a horror movie composer for Spider-Man 3 was a master stroke. I really like that decision. Now, obviously, I do have issues with Spider-Man 3. I've mentioned in the previous two videos that I'm not a big fan of James Franco as Harry Osborn. I said in the second movie he had grown on me a bit more. His acting was less wooden. But by Spider-Man 3, he's gone the opposite way in Spider-Man 3, where he's too over the top almost, which is weird because I also like it when actors are over the top in these movies, but for some reason with him it doesn't land the way it should. I think because for him it just comes off less natural than it does for Willem Dafoe to go over the top. For James Franco, it just feels like he's forcing himself to do something he's not good at. In a way, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just how I feel. And honestly, during a lot of his scenes, like that are supposed to be taken seriously, I just think are funny. Like the scene where Harry like bumps his head on the pipe and falls down, and we think he's gonna die. I actually laugh at that scene. Like I can't take it seriously because he like bonks his head, and it's like unintentionally funny to me. And so I just can't take that seriously. And I don't really like his arc in this movie, to be honest with you. I don't like that they give him amnesia. I think that's a real cop out, honestly. It's just lazy writing, in my opinion, to give him amnesia. It's like, oh shoot, at the end of Spider-Man 2, like he finds out that Peter is Spider-Man and he's implied he's going to be the next Green Goblin. So, but we don't want him in the middle of the movie, so we have to find a way to take him out. Let's just give him amnesia. I don't know. I just think that's a lazy way of writing him out. You know what I mean? I feel like they could have done something differently with that. Especially because like I get what they're kind of trying to do with it, where it's like, oh, like Peter and Harry, like they're back to being friends again, like they used to be in Spider-Man 1. But we didn't really get to see them be friends that much in Spider-Man 1, so it still doesn't really hit with me. I don't know. And then like James Frank or Harry Osborn falls for Mary Jane, and I don't like that aspect of the movie either. It just feels so forced. And it out of left field because they made a point of showing in the first movie that she never really liked Harry that way. That she dated Harry because Peter didn't have it in him to ask her out himself. So it's just weird to me that she likes him suddenly in Spider-Man 3 just because her and Peter aren't getting along. It just doesn't really add up. It just seems a little out of character. Um, and speaking of, I said in my review of Spider-Man 2 that I had started to not like Mary Jane in Spider-Man 2. I don't like her in Spider-Man 3 much either. Even though I think she's more justified in being upset in Spider-Man 3 because Peter does cheat on her, sort of. I mean, he kisses Gwen, in front of her and doesn't see a problem with that. Peter kind of like that. The big story of the first third or so of the movie is that Peter has his head so far up his own ass that he can't see that he and MJ are in a bad place as a couple. Which I think is interesting for the record, because I actually do really like Peter's arc in this movie for the most part. I like that in the first two movies, Peter is constantly punished for doing the right thing, but in this movie, the people finally love him. Everything's kind of coming together, and so he doesn't really want to see the troubles in he and MJ's relationship. I actually think that's really well handled. Um, where he like MJ's, talking about how awful her day was, and Peter kind of brushes it off, just like, "Oh, get back on the horse and try it again." Like he doesn't want to listen to her complain. Like he's kind of trying to push through it in a way so that he doesn't have to hear it and ruin his perfect image of how his life is. I think that's actually quite well handled, and it is a natural progression from what we saw before. And that last shot in Spider-Man 2, where MJ looks after Peter swinging away, like longingly, like she can tell, like this is going to be an issue for us. And yeah, so I think it makes sense for Spider-Man 3 to continue that. But as a whole, I think Peter and MJ are very toxic in Spider-Man 3. Like when they get back together at the end of Spider-Man 3, or at least it's implied they do, I'm not rooting for it. I'm like, no, stay apart. Like I don't want you guys together anymore. Like I already didn't really care for them when they weren't a couple yet in Spider-Man 2. I thought MJ was unnecessarily possessive of Peter in Spider-Man 2. But in Spider-Man 3, they're actually a couple, and I'd actually like them together even less as an actual couple, because they're just toxic to each other throughout the entire movie. And by the end, I don't want them to be a couple. It feels unearned. Their ending to me. I don't know. Maybe for other people they feel differently, but that's just how I feel. I don't really care for them as a couple in Spider-Man 3 at all. And you know, I don't like Venom. Let's go down the Venom rabbit hole. Yeah, I don't think Venom is good in this movie. I prefer the Venom stuff when it's Peter. You know what I mean? Like when it's Peter in the black suit, Peter being influenced by the symbiote. I like that aspect of Venom because I love how they treat the symbiote as like this metaphor for addiction. Like every time things get tough for Peter, he always goes to the suit to make himself feel better. I actually really love that aspect of the movie. And I actually don't mind like the dancing stuff and the the guy liner and and the hair stuff. Like I don't mind any of that because it makes him overconfident in himself, and he's a nerd, so he's gonna think that that's cool, and it's not. And the dancing scene, as I said in my last review, is a natural progression of the raindrops keep falling on my head sequence in Spider-Man 2. It's a natural progression. But for some reason, people don't notice that, or they just don't care. I don't know why, because that never bothered me, because it's a natural progression from what we saw in the second movie. Um, at least in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, the Eddie Brock stuff, though, I don't like the Eddie Brock stuff. Eddie Brock is such an unnecessary character here. And, to Sam Raimi's credit, his plan had been to introduce him in Spider Man 3 and then not make him Venom until Spider Man 4 or 5, which I think, and so then they could build up Peter and Eddie's like rivalry, turn friendship. And then he would become Venom and it would be like this tragic downfall, which I think would have been better because by doing it in just one film, we don't get to form a bond with Eddie, no pun intended. We don't get to form a bond with him. And so when he becomes Venom, we don't really care. Especially because as Eddie, even before Venom, he's never portrayed as a particularly good person. Which I think Sam Raimi said was intentional. He wanted him to be kind of like the dark Peter, like representing the dark side of Peter. But Peter is already representing the dark side of Peter, so I don't even think that fully lands. And I don't know, Eddie's just too mean to really care about. He prays for Peter to die. Like he literally goes to church and prays for Peter to die, and we don't even know if he's religious, so it kind of comes off as though Peter's saying, you want forgiveness, get religion. He goes to the church. It's almost like he's taking him literally, which almost just makes Eddie look like an idiot. um like because we don't even know if he's actually religious or not, or if he's literally just saying, literally just going there because Peter told him to. It just comes off as a little odd. And it's actually implied in the movie that Eddie is kind of an incel because he talks to J. Jonah Jameson about how he's gonna marry Gwen Stacy. And then we learn from Gwen herself that they only had like one night together and that they weren't even actually a couple. So he's actually kind of an incel on top of that. So he's just, and he doctors photos to slander Spider-Man and get a promotion. And yeah, when he becomes Venom, he lets it fully corrupt him. And yeah, he kidnaps Mary Jane, and Peter frees him from the symbiote, and Eddie just goes back into it and dies with it. It's like he's not a likable character. Like none of his arc really works for me in this movie. Yeah, because like before he's Venom, he's just constantly an asshole, and then when he actually becomes Venom, there's no tragedy of like him wanting to be free of it and Peter but not having the strength to do it. Like there's no arc with him, and he has no connection to Harry Osborn. So him killing Harry Osborn also feels really unearned to me, like, 'cause it just doesn't fit. Like it doesn't feel built up at all. You know, and the Sandman, I think the Sandman is definitely better than Harry or Venom, but he still has problems. Not Thomas Hayden Church's performance, mind you. I think Thomas Hayden Church is an excellent Sandman. I think he's probably one of the saving graces of Spider-Man 3 is just his performance. He's right up there for me with Willem Dafoe and Alfred Molina in great Spider-Man movie villain performances. And I actually wish that No Way Home let him really be there and not just be a sand CGI person the whole movie, because I think that unfortunately took away from what could have been a really great follow-up performance for him. It probably had to do with his age, to be fair, but you never know. I mean, Alfred Molina, they made him look young with CGI. Why couldn't they do it with Thomas Hayden Church? It doesn't matter. Like that's not the point. And, they do a good job with the Sandman. The whole like like I've done bad things, but I'm not a bad person. like thing. I actually think that really works, and I like that he has a daughter that's sick and he's trying to take care of her. And I love the scene where he goes back to his apartment and his wife isn't happy to see him. Like I think it's very well acted and very realistic. And his daughter still loves him, like she doesn't see him as any less. I think that's very wholesome. And you really feel their bond, even though you don't really get to see any scenes of them together before he's a criminal. I still think it works with minimal screen time just because of the sheer writing and the sheer acting of it. I think it's very well done. And the scene where he actually becomes the Sandman is a beautiful piece of cinema. It's some of the best looking CGI I've ever seen in my life. And it's scenes like that that really show how much CGI has dropped off. Because most movies, barring the Avatar movies, CGI looks regularly awful in modern movies a lot of the time. And you can use things like Spider-Man 3 to show like how much better CGI used to be, in his earlier days in a way. That and like Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean. So yeah, I think his birth into the Sandman is great, and I think all the scenes of him before he becomes a Sandman are also really well done. And his performance is consistently good throughout. My issue with him comes with part of his origin story, and I think if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And it's the decision to make him Uncle Ben's killer. I don't get it. Like, I don't get the point of it at all, honestly, because I mean, I get why Sam Raimi did it, okay? Sam Raimi just liked working with Cliff Robertson, Uncle Ben's actor. He liked working with him, so he was constantly looking for excuses to bring him back for the sequels, to do more scenes with him. And I understand that, but realistically speaking, there was no reason for Uncle Ben to be talked about at all in Spider-Man 3. There was no reason for it at all. Because in Spider-Man 1, it was about Peter on his own coming to grips with Uncle Ben's death and what Uncle Ben meant to him when he was alive, and taking up Uncle Ben's advice. With great power comes great responsibility. And then in Spider-Man 2, it's about him feeling guilty about not telling Aunt May the culpability he has in Uncle Ben's death. And then he tells her, and she has to process it and forgive him. After that, Uncle Ben should not factor into his story at all. Like, there's no reason at all for Uncle Ben to factor past Spider-Man 2. So they had to make up a reason by just making the Sandman his real killer. But then, and they do initially do some interesting things with that, where Peter uses the suit to try and get his revenge. And the scene where he fights the Sandman underground and tries to kill him with the water, it's actually a very well done scene. It's probably one of the best black suit Spider-Man scenes in the movie for me. Um, but then later in the movie, and what's admittedly a very well acted scene, we learn that Sandman didn't actually do it on purpose, that he like accidentally shot him, which is silly. So it's like, oh, at first this guy killed Uncle Ben. What a bad person. No, this guy killed Uncle Ben. What a bad person. Oh, actually, it was an accident. So no one really murdered him because he didn't mean to kill him. Oh no! Like it honestly does retroactively ruin Uncle Ben's death for me a little bit because it takes away from the tragedy of it and Peter getting revenge on Dennis Carradine. Like it kind of takes away from all of it when you know that Dennis Carradine didn't actually do it. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I don't think it lands the way that Sam Raimi was hoping it would. And this like people blame Sony for forcing Venom into this movie as the sole reason Spider-Man 3 is bad. It's not. Like this part with Sandman being Uncle Ben's killer retroactively, that was going to be in the Vulture version of this movie too. That was always going to be in it. And in my opinion, that alone meant Spider-Man 3 was always going to be the weakest of the trilogy, even without Venom. And like I said, the black suit stuff with Peter, I actually think are some of the best parts of Spider-Man 3. So I don't think Venom alone is to blame for Spider-Man 3 being a lackluster film because I don't think this movie does justice with Harry really either. It makes Peter and MJ's relationship even worse than it was in Spider-Man 2. And even the Sandman, who's mostly good, they retroactively make him Uncle Ben's killer, which just ruins the impact of that story and that character arc that Peter went on in the first two movies. Yeah, and yeah, Eddie is not but yeah, as far as Venom goes, yeah, Eddie's not effective as a villain at all. His arc is really rushed, and he's never presented as a good person, so there's never any sense of tragedy with it at all. So yeah, all those things together, it just doesn't really work for me. I still think it's a well-paced movie. Like it's never a boring film, which I think is good. But it does have a lot of things in it that I just don't think work. And another thing I don't think works, and this is probably going to give me some flack, is in my what if videos, a lot of people said they actually liked this aspect of Spider-Man 3, which is actually Bryce Dallas Howard's performance as Gwen Stacy. I don't think she's terrible, but I don't really see why she needed to be in the movie at all, other than to add another obstacle to Peter and MJ's romance. Like she's just an obstacle. That's all she is. She doesn't add anything to the story otherwise. Because like they to tease that maybe another connection for her will be through Eddie, but then it's revealed that her and Eddie weren't even really a couple. And Gwen also is a bit of a confused character because early in the movie she's very clearly flirting with Peter, and when Peter gets off like when he and MJ break up, she's very quick to start dating Peter. So it's like at first she doesn't mind being the other girl, but then in the club, when Peter uses her to impress to like get back at MJ, now she's suddenly offended. Like it kind of gives off mixed messages in a way. So her character is a little confused to me at points. And Bryce Dallas Howard's performance, like she's a good actor and a great director too. But she's not really given much to work with in this. Like she wasn't meant to be in this movie. She was put in because they didn't think Kirsten Dunst would come back for Spider-Man 4, which never even ended up happening anyway. But so they brought in Gwen's as a backup so that they could have a new love interest in place for Spider-Man 4 if MJ couldn't come back. But then in Spider-Man 4 they were just gonna have Black Cat. So it's like what we're gonna have three love interests in Spider-Man 4? Like it just doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too far into that, but yeah, so and another thing I have a problem with is the opening third of the movie is all about Peter, like I said, having his head so far up his own ass. Like he wants to see everything is great and perfect, so he doesn't see that everything's not perfect. And he's arrogant and stuff like that. And he's let the fame go to his head, but then when he learns about the Sandman killing Uncle Ben, he becomes really angry. And then that early stuff in the movie about him being full of himself from the Spider-Man fame, that doesn't come back again in the movie. His arrogance is now because of the suit, not because of his fame as Spider-Man. Like that aspect of the movie doesn't really come back into play at all, in my opinion. Like Harry or Peter never really learns a lesson from that. If you ask me, maybe other people can see an arc there that I'm not seeing, but for me, I just don't see any kind of arc, like any kind of satisfying closure for that arc with Peter. But maybe that, like I said, maybe that's just me. But yeah, let's get into the positives. Aside from the score and the pacing, there are other good things in this movie. I think the dancing scene makes sense for Peter. It's actually a very funny scene in my opinion. I think the acting all around is very good in this movie, aside from James Franco and Topher Grace. I don't like them, but everyone else in this movie is doing just fine. Rosemary Harris is great as Aunt May once again. The scene where Peter tells Aunt May gleefully that Spider-Man killed the Sandman, and her reaction to that, I love that scene because she never outright says, "I know you're Spider-Man," just like in Spider-Man 2, where it's implied she knows, but she doesn't say it. They continue that in Spider-Man 3 expertly in this scene, where she basically implies again she knows, but she doesn't outright say it. And I like that. I think it's a great continuation. And I like that she says, you know, your Uncle Ben would never want us to live with revenge in our hearts even for a second. I think that's a natural progression for that, even though I don't think Uncle Ben needed to be part of the story by this point. If you're gonna have him in, I think these are the kind of scenes to have. It's well done. Um, you know, so I like that. The action scenes in this movie are fantastic. The special effects are way better in this movie than the first movie, and even the second movie to a degree. And like I said, I think besides the Uncle Ben stuff, I think the Sandman's a fantastic villain, right up there with the first two movies' villains. You know, and I like I even though the arc is a little messy at times, I do like the general arc Peter goes on of using the black suit as a metaphor for addiction, you know, to cope with his problems. And when he hurts the person that he cares about the most in the world, you know, when he hurts the person he cares about the most, he hits MJ. He immediately feels guilt and he rips the suit off. I like that. I think that's a natural progression for him. You know, I think that really works for him. So yeah, overall, I don't hate Spider-Man 3. There's enough in Spider-Man 3 that I like that I think it's you know, it's good for the most part. I think it's well paced, has great music, great action scenes, great special effects. The acting, for the most part, is at least solid. And I think Peter mostly goes through a decent character arc, aside from some confused stuff where like the first third of the movie doesn't really come back into play in the second and third uh, parts of the movie for Peter. You know, aside from that, I think Peter's has a pretty decent arc in this movie. And yeah, I mean, I like the suit. I like the stuff with Peter in the suit. I think the Sandman's mostly a good villain, other than the Uncle Ben stuff. You know, and yeah, it's never a boring film. Like, yeah, it has a lot of good in it. Like, it has a lot of bad in it too. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have so much bad that it's an awful film. It's definitely a step down from Spider-Man's one and two, but you know, it's not even my least favorite Spider-Man movie. Like, it has enough good in it to keep me still coming back to it. I think it's a perfectly serviceable conclusion. Could it have been much better? Yeah. And to be honest, it doesn't actually feel like the end because it wasn't supposed to be. You know, we were supposed to get another three Tobey Maguire movies. Like Sam Raimi always envisioned it as a six-movie saga. That unfortunately we didn't get that far with it. So it doesn't feel quite like the end. So it doesn't satisfy in that way either, unfortunately. But yeah, it does. It, like I say, it has a lot of bad, which I won't go over that again because I've already gone over it enough. But overall, it kind of evens out. Like if I were grading by letter, this movie would probably be like a C. Like it's like half good and half bad for me. You know, so it kind of just evens out. So I don't think it's horrible enough to get an A. So I'm going to give Spider-Man 3 an okay. Okay, because it's not amazing, no pun intended, but it's not terrible either. It's perfectly middle of the road, has enough good in it to keep it from being awful, but enough bad to keep it from being good. So it's about here for me. So I'm going to give it an okay. But anyway, thank you guys for watching this review and all three of my reviews, hopefully. And I do intend to review the Amazing Spider-Man movies as well, so be sure to stay tuned in for those. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up, share it with all your friends and all your various social media platforms. And if I did miss out on anything in this review, make sure to leave it in the comments down below, along with recommendations for other movies you might like to see me review. And I'll see all of you in the next video.